Hey everybody, grab your Bible and a pencil and a journal and even a cup of coffee and join in on our conversation. But first, I would like for you to write this down. Genesis 3, verses 1 through 6. Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Indeed, had God said, You shall not eat of any tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, From the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat from it or even touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, You surely shall not die. For God knows that in the days that you eat, that your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate, and she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate.
Hey everyone, welcome to Write This Down with Dot Bowen. My name is Cara. I am Dot's daughter, and every week we sit down together and we talk through truth and scripture, and we are doing something a little different with this episode and next week's episode. We are talking about, it's really my story and my mom and I's story. We get a lot of comments about how we're so close, and we have not always been this way. And a lot of it has to do with what was going on in my life growing up. And in this episode, we kind of set the stage for that. It's a lot of backstory, but it is important, I promise you. And I will say it's really important that you come back next week and get the second half of the story, because that's when it gets really good. But we're really glad that you're here, and we would love for you to pull up a chair and join in our conversation.
Hey, Cara.
Hey, Mom.
Hey, you're not as chirpy today, huh?
I know. I am a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. But it's a good nerves. But this is definitely going to be a very different conversation than we've ever had on here, at least. So yeah, I'm a little.
Actually, I'm not sure we've ever had this conversation.
Well, maybe that's why I'm nervous.
I don't think we've ever discussed it, with other people in the conversation.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this in pieces too, because we're going to kind of talk about a lot of things. But yeah, so I'm nervous, but I think it will be really good. I think people will enjoy this conversation. At least I hope so. But because I do feel like, I know I get this a lot, and I think you do too, but a lot of people comment on our relationship of just how close we are, and, how being able to talk about these kind of things and, whatnot. And it's funny because anytime someone mentions that, I think it's almost like a gratitude moment I have, because I know that we have not always had this kind of relationship. And there are times in my life where I thought we would never be able to have this kind of relationship. So I'm always grateful. I have this moment whenever someone says something internally. I just almost just thanking the Lord for what He's done, which is, I know, a lot of what we're going to talk about, what God has done in our relationship. But yeah, I am nervous.
Yeah. Well, I do want to kind of take the pressure off of you, because even though we're talking about our relationship, there's two of us in this relationship, and, people do. They say often to me, oh, I just love the way that you're so close to your daughter, Cara, and all your children. And, and the fact of how you get to serve Jesus together. And I do think often, if you only knew, because this is a God story. This isn't a Cara and Dot story. Right. This isn't about a mom and a daughter story. Even though we are part of the story, this isn't, we're not the main characters in this story.
Yeah, and I hope it gives someone hope that maybe if they have a strained relationship with their child, that, God can restore and redeem literally any relationship. And I think we are a living testament of that. So,
absolutely.
And hopefully, I think like anything, with healing, we don't know if He will, but I think for us, anyway, we can get into it later, but I am excited about having the conversation though. So should we get into it?
Well, let me start.
Rip the Band-Aid. Okay.
Yep. And let's just start from the very beginning. in the fact that I literally want to start where your dad came to me and he said, I think we should have another child. And your siblings, your sister was 13 and your brother was 10 at the time. And I remember thinking, no. Like he had gone to this conference, that the guy that was speaking was not married, nor did he ever have any children. And
So yeah,
he
that's
thought
ironic.
that all these Christians, he thought all these Christians should have children. And so when Howard was at this conference, he felt really convicted that maybe we should have another child. And I really thought there's no way. And I remember thinking, okay, we can try it for 1 month, because I really didn't have an easy time getting pregnant, before. So I thought, kind of put him off a little bit. And I thought, you know what, we can try for 1 month. And if I get pregnant, then we just know that it's of God's will. But I never in a million years thought I'd get pregnant. And like I said, I had children that were older, and the last thing I wanted to do, was to start back in the diapers. I mean, I literally was able to go to the bathroom by myself. I was able to go to the grocery store, and now he's wanting to have this baby. And I just want to back up a little bit in that at this time, Howard and I were coming through and have really come through an amazing God story as well of how God had redeemed our marriage. And so here was, God has done a lot of stuff. He redeemed our marriage. He had, brought us together. And now he was, thinking we should have another child. So long story short, 9 months short, I get pregnant
spoiler,
immediately.
You do. You get pregnant.
Yep,
Here I am.
I do. Yeah, there you are. And I remember telling Scott and Christy, we want to talk to you, and they thought we were going to give them a puppy.
Yeah.
And we said, no, it is going to be a baby. And we didn't know at the time, because back then you didn't know, and now you choose whether or not you want to know the gender. But we didn't know if you were a girl or boy. And so 9 months came. I was very stressed over this pregnancy because for whatever reason, and it's certainly not true today, I don't know why they felt like you were Sarah having a baby at 99. I mean, I was not that old, but every time I'd go to the doctor, they're like, well, maybe, maybe there might be something wrong with it.
I think back then,
it was just always hard.
Because it was in the 80s, there's my age for you. It was in the 80s. And I mean, you were in your 30s. And I think back then that was, I don't know why it's different now, because I feel like women, like you said, have babies in their 30s all the time now. But there seemed to be a legitimate risk or worry from what you've told me. Obviously, I don't know. But so yeah, I don't know. But anyway.
Well, I will say this. We had 18-hour labor, 18 hours, in labor, and then an emergency C-section. And the cord was around your neck. Your heart rate was going down. Mine was. I had, because it was 18 hours, I'd had epidural over a period of, 18 hours. And so the anesthesiologist literally was sitting at my head, taking a needle and poking it in my chest to see if, making sure that the epidural wasn't coming up. And I remember him saying, something about something. And I guess I smarted off. And he said something about being in a bad mood. And I'm like,
shocking.
Well, would I like to, what if I was sitting there poking needles on, you, and I've been doing this for 18 hours. So anyway, we had an emergency C-section. And so little did I know that that may be a little bit of a prophecy, because it was hard. It was difficult, and it turned out amazing. You were healthy, you were beautiful, and we were just so excited.
Yeah. Well, I think we tell that part because it's, I believe anyone who's here, there's a reason you're here. But for our story in particular, it was very clear that the Lord wanted me here. Which it's a good reminder for me too, because sometimes, it's like, what am I doing here? But
what's
I
my
think,
purpose?
I think that, I don't know, it's just like a good, like I said, I think every life here has a purpose, or you wouldn't be here. But for purposes of this story, I think it makes sense and makes a difference.
So, as I said, I had a 13-year-old, probably 14 by this time, an 11-year-old, and they were in school. Their school was way far away. We'd have to drive, carpool them, but actually I was the main driver, and it was a long ways. They were active in, a lot of things, and so I'd stay at school, and I was really involved, teaching youth and stuff. So basically, I spent a lot of time with Christy and Scott, and you stayed with your dad a lot. There would be times your dad would bring you to wherever we were, and I was like, "Oh my! Did
he let me dress myself a lot?"
Out?
And
yes, he did.
And I was like a 2-year-old, so you can imagine what I would piece together.
And if you, no, nobody can imagine. And I would just remember, I shouldn't say anything because, he's been with her and taking care of her, and was a comb not an option today? She wasn't going to comb her hair, and he said, she always wants to wear this. I'm like, yep, she sure does. So anyway, but that space with us, again, was a little difficult. School started. You started into school again. You're almost like an only child, and you're almost like the firstborn, and then you're almost the baby. And it was just a lot of things. It was Christy, and I think she thought she had another child, and she mothered you and wanted to mother you and take care of you and dress you. And Scott, he just wanted you.
I felt like I had 2 moms for most of my life, good or bad. But, yeah.
And it was great. But I'm just saying there was a lot of distance and there was a lot of time that, and then you were tall for your age. So then you go to school. There are a lot, being able to feel like, I remember you wanting to stay after school program. And I didn't work at the time. I worked. I was home, stay home mom. But I remember thinking, Cara, I said, Cara, why do you want to stay after school? And you'd say, well, my children, that's what you call it, my children would miss me.
I need to take care of them.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And so there was always that, but there was also some hurt and some loneliness.
Yeah. Well, I can speak into that because looking back, I had a lot of pain in my childhood for sure. I never felt really accepted. I always felt, and again, feeling, because I had a lot of friends. So, I was not like an outcast by any means in terms of what you would see, but I was incredibly insecure. I'm 5'9", 5'10" now, and I think I hit my height at 12. So for perspective, I was very tall. I'm already tall as an adult, but I legitimately I think I was 5'6". I found a basketball card when we were cleaning out your house, and I think I was 10 and I was 5'6" already. So I was very tall. I felt very awkward. I just was not comfortable in my own skin. I did not like who I was. I didn't like my personality. I remember you and Christy had very similar personalities, both very extroverted, both, don't know a stranger. You could talk to anyone. And I remember looking at the both of you and wishing I was like that. And I was more reserved. I was more quiet. Even if I was comfortable in my own skin, that's just naturally how, I'm more introverted. That's just how God made me. But I hated that. So not only did I not like what I looked like, I didn't like who I was on the inside either. Yeah.
I remember you saying to me one time, I don't know if you remember this or not, but you'd say, Mom, you could talk to a wall. And I said, yeah, I probably don't care if it talks back. And you're like, well, how do you do that? Like you just go up to people and you just start talking to them. And I said, yeah. And she said, and you said to me, well, how do you know that they want to talk to you? And I remember thinking, well, I never thought of it. And I said, well, I never thought that they didn't. And you're like, you never thought that they didn't want to talk to you? And I'm like, never crossed my mind.
I assume they didn't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
So that's
You're like,
that
what
was
is
what I was
happening? Yeah.
operating out of. Yeah. And that was a very, like, very real. And like now we laugh about, because I'm very, I mean, I feel like we were telling this story, and when we get really into like the meat of it, telling it from a healed perspective as well. Like I see, and I was not, I was never chosen for anything. Like I remember dance after dance. I mean, I even high school, like middle school dances, like everything, like sitting on the sidelines, sitting, like no one ever wanted to dance with me. Like I just,
because the guys were 5'2".
well, yeah, I mean, there's think of like a middle school boy, and then I was already Jolly Green Giant over here. And on top of that, I wasn't confident. Like I didn't, like I said, I didn't, it wasn't just externally was I uncomfortable, it was internal.
Right.
And that carried through a lot of years. And what I didn't know at the time, in hindsight, is that the enemy was setting me up. And a lot of, I didn't know, and again, this is where I know now as an adult, like how I'm wired, and I am such an internal processor. And again, goes very different. You and Christy are the most external processors I know.
Yeah.
And so, and I mean, I remember you would say like, how was school? And I would be the kid and be like, it was good. Like, cause I'm like, I don't know what else to say. So I say that to say like, I didn't know how to express what I was feeling. Cause I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't know I felt so uncomfortable. I just knew like there's something that wasn't, like I knew I wasn't probably super confident, but I could not. So I was suppressing everything, but I also didn't know I was suppressing everything. And I don't even think you knew to even know that I was suppressing everything, because I put on a front, like unintentionally probably put on a front. I mean, I'm sure you thought I was like going through, especially in high school, like typical high school insecurity things, but
it is hard as a mom.
Yeah.
It is hard as a mom to see your daughter cry over not being picked. You didn't want to go to the dances because you said nobody's going to dance with me. Now, I will have to say there's a strong thing about feelings and truth, because you would tell me you had no friends, and then I would take you to carpool this, and everybody would, oh, Cara, come running out. And then whenever I went to school, even in high school, when I would go, everybody talked about how much, how wonderful you were and stuff like that. So it isn't necessarily that reality is not, sometimes it's not what we feel. Our feelings aren't always what is true in reality. But it didn't matter if I really knew the truth and knew that you were loved, and a lot of people enjoyed being with you. And yes, you were an extrovert, but you did always want to be around people. That's why you wanted to stay, after school, because, again, remember your siblings are a lot older. So you're really a baby, but you're really the firstborn. You're really, the third, but you're really almost like the only child. It was just so many, different things that were playing, I think, in your mind. And then, like you said, the enemy was definitely taking every opportunity to make you feel not chosen. No one's going to care for you. No one's going to love you. No one's going to accept you. And even though you were with friends and you had friends, I don't think you ever felt like you had them.
Oh, no. Well, because I didn't know who I was, so I wasn't myself. Like I always felt like I had to perform or to be a certain way. And I felt that even at home. Like I felt like this is who, like I grew up in a very, very strong Christian, and I had a lot of eyes on me because just with the nature of who we knew, where we were, going to church, like that sort of thing. Like everyone knew, oh, I'm a Bowen. Like it was a thing. This is how Bowens act. This is what Bowens do. This is, I was very much the perception. So I felt that of like, just very performance driven. Like this is who I need to be. This is how I need to act. More so, this is how I need to act, more so than this is how I need to be. But I compared myself a lot to Scott and Christy and like, oh, this is how I need to be. Like, this is, and I think like a lot of teenagers like wrestling with that, I think it would have made a big difference if I felt like I had a safe place to do that. And I'm not saying it wasn't safe. It was just my perception, and I didn't know how to process it because all this is like in hindsight. And I think if I had known like, oh, like it's okay to doubt God with God, like it's okay to question him or to be upset with him or to, whatever emotion,
not like what he's doing,
like be mad at him, or not, or even feel hurt by God. Like I didn't know I didn't know that was okay. And it could have even been taught to me. So I'm not even saying it wasn't taught. I just never heard it. If it was, if for whatever reason it didn't stick. And so I think that was a lot of how the enemy set me up. And I think that, like, I would say even looking back on our relationship at that time, I wouldn't say that we weren't close, but at the same time, we didn't like really talk about things because I didn't know how to talk about them. Like I don't think that was either of ours. It's no one's fault. There's no one to blame. It just was more of like, I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't even know what I was feeling or thinking. And so that's where it kind of gets back to like, oh, how was school? I would be like, oh, good. Like I just didn't, or I would say what I felt like you wanted to hear, and not because not in a lying, but just like, I just wanted to please my mom, like it came from a genuine place, I guess is what I mean.
Sure. And again, I'm not taking the blame and I'm not going to take the credit with your relationship and what God has done. And I'm not going to take the blame for some of the other things of what you have done, what you've done, and some of the choices you've made, and then some of the things that, God has done in your life, good and bad. These are, certainly your relationship with God and you working through some of the things. But a mom does have a role. There are certain things that, you're just busy, and I didn't intentionally not have this strong relationship with you. But again, setting it up, I'm not, making any excuses. It's just what it is. And that is, I was really busy with the older children. And then, and so a lot of that, when I would say house school, if you'd have started in with a lot of stuff, I probably would have tuned you out anyway, because I'd already been going through teenage years with with Christy's and with Scott and, those kind of things.
Well, and at this time, Christy was married. She had kids. She was trying to figure out how to be a mom. So you were helping her. Like there was a lot going on. And I was so different than Christy. I mean, I don't know if that affected, but even like if you were to ask Christy, how was your day at school? I mean, I'm sure she rattled off, like
she
all
told
the
me
details.
Before I asked.
Exactly. So, and they're both, it's just two different personalities. And so I think that probably, so when I say, oh, it's good, it was like, well, just leave, all right, that's that.
Yeah. Because I have other issues I have to take care of with all the other children. But I will say this, that, as we look back and what we're saying is we see that there is a life that God allowed to be born and be, in our family. And you were that person, and that God chose you, and that God wanted you. I mean, Howard might have walked up and said, I think we should have, another child. But it was God that brought you into this world. And I almost lost you. And so those are things we go back to that. So the enemy really wanted, I think, we do have a spiritual warfare. That's why I read Genesis 3. The serpent, was coming after God's two children. And I want to say this, God, perfect father, in a perfect world with one rule, couldn't control their children. And so I always think back about how, unless God steps in and changes a life, unless God steps in and reveals a lot of things to you, no matter what I said to you, or no matter even what you had said. I mean, this was a journey that God was drawing you closer to him, and the enemy was trying to draw you away from him. I did not know that at the time. As we get into our
I
next
didn't either.
session. Yeah. And as we get into our next thing, we'll see, now we look back, we always look back and can say, oh, those were little breadcrumbs that God was trying to warn us, or those are some of the things that if we'd have, slowed down, paid a lot of attention, then maybe we would have seen them. I don't know, but we're all human. And I just realized that, when you came along and where I was, and then I started going through the change of life, that was horrible. And so there were so many things that, it's like a perfect storm. And it was as if the enemy wanted to step in right then and make sure that you believed lies about yourself. You're always beautiful. Your brothers and your sister had chosen to follow Jesus. They were very faithful in their walk. And I remember after some of bad choices that you made that we're going to talk about, what God has done in your life. I remember you saying to me, I never felt like I could measure up to be Christy. I remember you saying to me, well, I'm not Christy, I'm not Scott. And I would say, I'm like, well, I know, honey, I never wanted you to be them. I have them.
Yeah.
I have them.
Well, I think the biggest thing.
I want you to be you.
Yeah. The biggest thing, and I didn't know who that was, but I think the biggest thing, like looking back of how the enemy was setting me up for when I did go off to school, was I was so focused on what I was doing. And I think that's why I had no idea what was going on in my heart. And so all I looked at was like, I'm doing all the right things. I'm the good Christian girl. I go to church. I read my Bible. I pray. I love the Lord. I have the right friends. Like I'm not doing anything. It was all about performance. Like that was a thing that the enemy really got me. And I don't blame that on, like you could be like, oh, what church did you, or who are you being taught? It's like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because that's not at all that's not the environment that there's literally no fault in that. It just was the enemy for whatever reason over many, many years. That was what he was putting in me, was looking at my performance and ignoring I had no clue what was going on in my heart. And then, of course, when a few years later, when I get into college and then I get into situations and it's like, what's in your heart comes out. And I had no idea. And so I think that's like one thing, where whether it's in relationships or just even your relationship with the Lord, like to not be so hyper-focused on what am I doing? I know that like faith without works is dead, but also like you need faith, like there's, it's like being,
Well, I was going to say, like, one of the things you always would say about Christy and Scott, you would talk about their performance. I can't be like them.
Well, that's all I knew. That's all I was focusing on.
And so then you internally did that as well. And of course, obedience is a key. And I'm sure that, as a teenager, we are talking about performance all the time. But I do want to go back and say, so basically in your high school years, you were trying to be the goody-goody Christian.
100%. Who I thought I was supposed to be. It's like I'm a Bowen. We go to church. We're very high up in leadership. Like that's who I was. That's how I perceived who I was.
So basically you were using God to run from God.
100%.
Using God. I'm a Christian. I go to church. I'm in the youth. I go to all of the church camps. I do, all those things. But yet your heart.
Well, it led to a very entitled heart, because I felt like I'm doing all the right things. So it wasn't necessarily using God to run from God. I know that's what I was doing, but it was more, I was using God to get God. I wanted to try to get God to do what I want him to do. Like if
performance.
If I do everything right, then he's going to answer my prayers the way I want him to. He's going to do what I want him to. Because I've been the good Christian girl. Like, why would he not? And so it led to, I felt very entitled. to that. Like you owe me, which I hate. Like every time I say that in that part of my story, it makes like my skin crawl because I'm like, God does not owe me anything. Like at this point in my walk and where I'm at and where God's brought me, it's like, I can't even believe that I had the audacity to have that mentality with the Lord. But I did. I felt like that. I felt like you owe me. Like like, look at everything I've done for you. Look at what I do. Look at what I don't do,
Oh, I could really be bad. And, I didn't go out with them. I didn't go out with those friends.
Yeah. Like I didn't drink anything at that party, or I didn't even go to the party, or I didn't, I chose the friends. And I think that's the other thing too, is I chose my friends, and not like they, I don't know who I would have been friends with, but I chose them based off of that, which again, I don't think this is bad, but it goes back to like, I don't know that I think that's where I didn't really feel connected to them, because it was more of like, oh, you're good Christians, I'm just going to be friends with you, rather than, and not all my friends were like that. I had some like very dear and close friends growing up. And one of them, God used to ultimately save my life. But yeah, it was, so I think that was like part of it too, why I never really felt super connected to my friends, because it was more of like, what are you doing? So everything, I went through everything with performing, even the Lord, like how was the Lord performing in my life? Like that was the root of almost everything. And what you don't know, or you do know, but I never really connected it until this moment, is that the enemy had done the same thing to me many years ago. Remember I told you came from this redemptive, where God had totally changed my life and redeemed our marriage and everything. But the reason that we were having the marital problems is that I too was waiting on God to do, and what I wanted him to do. And I felt like I was in church all the time and doing all the right things. Now, I don't think that I passed that on to you, but I could have. But what I'm saying is, I think what I want to say is that Satan uses the same thing over and over again. And we so often think, well, if I just do all the right things, then God owes me this and this. We forget about the cross. We forget about what he has done. Well, I think what it was not that you passed it. I don't feel like that you passed it down to me, or not even passed it. That's not something you inherit, but I don't see it like that. I see it more of like, again, 100% hindsight, but you and I are wired so similarly. I think it more was like, we don't want pain. We don't want anything to go wrong, or we don't, and so I see it more as like, I think we were just wired so similarly that the enemy used the same tactic on both of us, because he knew, just observing us. I mean, he doesn't know our hearts, but just observing us, he saw like, okay, like I have this tendency, to whatever, like kind of look at that so that we can, if we do everything right, then everything will go well. We don't have to deal with pain, or we don't have to deal with uncomfortable. We don't have to deal with, whatever. So that's
weird.
That's how I see it, is just that of, we just were so similar. And so the enemy used the same tactic.
And I think too, again, it is easy to have the wrong view of God, which is the wrong view of God, in the fact that if I do things and do all the religious things, then God owes us, instead of looking at God as a loving God and not a Santa Claus. It's not like I give in my list and he's supposed to, fulfill them and things like that. It's just, it's hard. And I know that the world plays into that. We live in a world where performance is everything, what we look like, what we have, and everything. So now the enemy is taking, not only our view of God, but the world's view, and kind of, putting an emphasis on it. It's kind of making our view of God seem normal and right. And I'm not saying that God doesn't bless obedience. I'm not saying God, obedience is key to, like you said, if you love me, you'll do what I mean, if you have faith in me, you'll do that.
I live very similarly now than I did when I was in high school in a lot of ways, but my motivation is 100% different. So that's
there's a difference in your heart.
Yes. Like what I did when I was younger and doing all the quote unquote right things, I did it so that God would bless me. And now I do it because I love the Lord, and I'm just blessed because I know him, whether or not he does anything or not. I mean, I have to keep that in check. I'm not saying it's like I do that perfectly, but I think it's like me centered versus God centered. Like that's all. It's all about me. It's all about God doing what I want him to do. All about God being who I want him to be. And I didn't really. And this is where it makes me sad. Like, cause I wasn't really trying to know the Lord to know him. Like I just trying to know the Lord so that he would do what I wanted him to do. Yeah. Like, and even like, I mean, I remember going to college and that was my mentality. It was like, I'm going to go to church. I'm going to get the right friends. I'm going to be in the right sorority. I'm going to, like I had no intention of turning the way that I did. Which, I mean, it's a lot of, because a lot of people think that too. Like when I go into what happened in college, they think like, oh, like I went thinking like, oh, I'm going to go and like live and do whatever I want. And I was like, no, that was never my intention. And then I, go through rush and didn't get the sorority that I didn't get the good Christian sorority, which didn't make any sense to me because I was a good Christian girl. And, there was everything that I sought to have that was right and good in my eyes didn't happen. And then that's kind of when everything started. I was getting squeezed. You always say this, when you get put into pressure, like whatever comes out is what's in your heart. And I started to get squeezed in college. And what was in my heart which was a lot of bitterness and a lot of anger and a lot of entitlement. Because God was not performing the way that I expected him to, and what I was unknowingly demanding him to. So I was mad.
For me as a mom, I could see the misery. You're very much like me. You said that. We're wired a lot.
We're very transparent.
We're very transparent, and I could see hurt. I could see hurt in your eyes. I remember, as your mom crying when you would go to the dance and you'd come back and say, nobody danced with me.
I mean, I didn't go on one date in high school. I mean, for perspective, when I say like, I was not the girl that was chosen. Like I wasn't, I was not asked I was not asked on one date in high school. No one,
I'm not saying no one. This mother was praying. Yeah. I'm just saying this mother was praying. I was seeing the hurt and I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't know at the time that Satan was setting you up. I was just a mom that wanted your daughter to be happy. And you would tell me, like, Mom, nobody wants me or nobody's chosen me. And I'm like, honey, you're beautiful. They're insecure. They're jealous, all these things. In the meantime, I'm on my knees and I'm praying, God, just let somebody ask her out. Let her, have a date. Let her, these things. And as a mother, I wasn't aware that Satan was about to give you some choices that these feelings were so strong that would cause you to go down that path. I didn't know that. I didn't know what was ahead of you, but I knew enough. I knew that you were hurting, and I knew that life wasn't the way that you wanted it to be. And, just comments and things that you would say, like, I'm never chosen, I'm ugly, I feel fat. I'm like, honey, you're not any of those. Those are just feelings. And
even my personality, like, I felt like I was boring. I felt like no one thinks I'm fun, or I don't remember what I would say. Yeah. Some, things along those lines. Like it was, I was very miserable.
And so
internally.
Yeah. And I don't know that you even knew how miserable you were, because you probably stuffed it.
I did.
But I know I
had
didn't.
No idea.
And I, again, you could probably see the pain in your eyes as I could see, but we had no idea what was going, what in a few years, that unresolved lies that you believed that were never told, that never, revealed the truth. Little did we know that there was going to be some big choices in your life that you were going to draw from all of those lies you had embraced to be true. I didn't know all the lies that was going in. I could see the pain. I could see the hurt. And I remember you saying, Mom, I've just been praying for Christian friends. I'm like, honey, I'm praying for Christian friends for you too. And unfortunately, Christian friends are people. And they would disappoint you. And it makes it harder when they're friends. And then you would hear that this group of people got together and then they didn't invite you and all these things.
Oh my
and
gosh.
So
I mean, I can't even imagine
really
if I had,
hard time.
If I had social media back then, I don't even know what would have happened.
Oh, no.
But
well, we wouldn't be
having
to write this down. Yeah.
But yeah, I was being set up for sure.
Mm-hmm. And this mother is praying very hard. I could sense some things, but I didn't know exactly what the enemy was doing. And I certainly didn't know what God was doing. And I certainly didn't know what God was going to allow you to go through that pace. You know, with Adam and Eve, God said, don't do it. And then he walked away. And I'm like, why aren't you standing in front of that tree, jumping up and down, going, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But God gave them a choice because he loved them. And he wanted them to choose him over, disobedience. And so we don't realize that, when I think about Eve seeing that tree always, that wasn't the first time she saw that tree. But now Satan has got her. And there's a longing, because it says that she looked at it and she desired it. She desired something God had said no to. And this was way before she really took it. It was right before it. And so I think as we see like how you've worked, how God has worked in your life, and then you go off to college with this unhealthy biblical, view of who God is and who you are. I mean, unbiblical view of who God is, and then lies of who, and not knowing who you are, and then wanting godly friends, and then they don't accept you, but guess who does? Friends that are not Christians, they're making terrible choices. And I remember, and we're going to kind of leave it at that right now and come back to it next week. But I remember you saying to me, oh, Mom, these people, they accept me. They're so much fun. They laugh at my jokes. I mean, it's as if Satan had listened to everything you've said and wrote it down and then sent someone that would do exactly what you would think that, you wanted, never knowing that this was going to be one of the biggest mistakes of your life. And I had no idea. And neither did you.
Thanks for listening. I'm so glad that you could be a part of our conversation. To continue the conversation, you can find Dot on social media at .bowen or visit her website, .bowen.com. Subscribe, like, and share with your friends, and we will see you next week on Write This Down with Bowen.